challenge for our district, and how would you approach it?
When I looked at the district, I think that one of the things that I would be really excited about would be closing the achievement gap for students. So I think that there are many ways that we can all work together to be able to make that happen. I think that I bring some interesting and creative ideas to make that work. I also think that one of the things that I pride myself on, and some of the feedback that I get is that people will say to me, you know, you've been an administrator for 17 years, but you never forget what it's like to be a teacher. I mean, you get it. When you sit down, you understand what it's like to walk in those trenches. And so I think that that's really what I would love to tackle if I were awarded this opportunity. I would really like to attack the achievement gaps.
Data is important, but what else do you use for input on your decisions and recommendations?
I think that it's important to look at a comprehensive situation. So if we're looking at a student, for example, you don't just gauge a student based on data. We're talking about a person with a heart and soul. And so you have to look at the whole child. And so when you're making a decision about children, certainly you have to talk about test scores, but you also look at the other things that are needed in terms of the soft skills that we also need to teach. If we're looking at a program, data is important, but is it doable? So it could be the best program in the world, but if it doesn't work for the teachers that we live with, it's not the best program. So I think it's really important that you look at things from a comprehensive stance, and you have to make sure that the data and the program matches and meets the people that are going to implement this. So it really is about a collaborative spirit to make sure that what we're doing would fit the district and its need in its entirety.
As superintendent, you will need to learn a lot in a quick amount of time on the job. Where would you start, and what do you think would be your first step?
Well, I think the thing that has served me well is I am a quick study, so that's good news. And I have every one of the phone extensions in my head. I don't even need to look at the Rolodex anymore. So I am very good at making connections, and I'm not afraid to connect with the right people who are experts. I don't claim to be an expert in absolutely everything, but what I know for sure is I know how to reach out and who to reach out to. And so I think that would be what would be most important would be to be able to create solid relationships and make sure that I understood who to go to and how to get there.
Thank you.
So, what questions have we not asked that we should, and what's your response?
Wow. You haven't asked me if I was up for the challenge. And so I would say that I'm absolutely up for the challenge. You know, there are a few guarantees in life, but what I can promise you and guarantee is that you have somebody that doesn't go to bed until the job is done. You have somebody that attacks things with absolute enthusiasm. You can be guaranteed that every decision that I would ever make would have students at the forefront. You could also be guaranteed that I have a deep respect for my colleagues and for the educational staff in the community. And you can be guaranteed that I would give it absolutely everything that I had if I were awarded this position.
Thank you.
So, board members, if you would use the questions that you had for the other people, if they still apply, let's do that. Questions from the audience? Douglas will start.
All right. Plethora of nationalities of students in the district, and not enough relatable diversity in the staff. How or what changes do you plan to make?
That's an interesting question. You know, I can give you a great example from a building perspective. We have a young boy in my school that's from Yemen, and he speaks absolutely no English. And so you can imagine him arriving on scene in a quasi-rural community where ethnic diversity is not at a premium in the school that I'm in. And so it was important because every child holds the same weight in terms of importance. And so I had to be creative. And I knew the child spoke Arabic, and again, Monroe is not diverse, and so I thought, how am I going to find somebody to help me with this, because this child is not connected. So I reached out to Dearborn Public Schools, and I thought, it's the largest Arabic community in our southeastern area, and so I asked to speak to the gal who was in charge of English as a second language. So talk about God working in crazy ways. She came all the way from Dearborn and sort of served as a translator and as a role model for this student and helped me integrate him into the classroom. And because there were some cultural differences with the students in terms of how to play together and how to get along, she served as a translator so that the kids could actually speak to him and then he could actually speak back to them. And so, you know, here we are now. It's January, and so his English is a little better, and so it's getting a little easier, but this has served as someone who was able to help us out. So since that time, we actually recruited people within the community and found Arabic-speaking people, and so I was creative with some 31A money, and we were able to hire her, and she comes in and sort of sits with him and guides his work. On top of that, I think that it's really important at a district level to have an ELL expert. And so even if that person doesn't speak the language, it's someone who is an expert in terms of helping students learn a second language, and so I think that that's a really important piece.
Yeah, just
Okay, other than attracting new students, how do you plan to retain the students that we do have?
If there were opportunity, I would love to bring the idea of theme-based or niche schools. And so the ones that were up on the slide only happened out of passion from the school and needs of the student. And so those weren't canned programs that we just picked out of a hat. They were really decided based on teacher and student interest. So I think that particularly when we look at 21st century learning, we really have to do something that engages students. So I would love to be part of a collaborative think tank where we pulled people together to decide, you know, we have a strong base in our education system. How can we make it creative? How can we make it interesting? How can we make it attractive to retain our students and still serve quality education? So it's important to look at what you already have in terms of curriculum, and then how can you make it really inquiry-based. I think inquiry is really at the root of anything that's going to look different. And so if you root your work in inquiry and you put an umbrella over what serves the community, I think there's some interesting things that can happen in the classroom.
Okay, I have one more. Zero tolerance. Do you agree or disagree?
Wow, that's a big one. Well, there's zero tolerance, excuse me, for anything that we would do that would ever put a student in harm's way in any way, shape, or form. So I suppose that is my pat answer, but within zero tolerance, let's take bullying, for example. Of course, philosophically, there's a zero tolerance for bullying, no doubt about it. But zero tolerance doesn't mean that you crucify or put someone out to dry. You have to work through these issues. And so zero tolerance means that this is just exactly what is not going to be accepted or tolerated. But then, one thing to have zero tolerance, it's another thing to say, so now what? And so once you have zero tolerance, you have to decide how do you work through that. And so I would say that philosophically, I believe in a zero tolerance mantra, but I also believe in conflict resolution. And we're in the game of second chances, so we have to be able to teach people how to maneuver through those things, whether it's zero tolerance for weapons, zero tolerance for drugs, zero tolerance for anything, so. But first and foremost, the student always has to be safe.